and I'm honored to be here. In my life, I've had many friends. Some of them were Czechs. I remember here one of them, Josef Virgina. He was a great theologian, a great priest, a man of saintly life, and I have had the pleasure and the honor of being his friend. And I was with him the day before he died, with the Holy Father. We had lunch together. Nobody could expect them, and I think you should remember him. He has made a tremendous effort that has remained not continued to develop a theology starting with the experience of the faith of the people here in this country and in the other communist country, the faith rediscovered in persecution and through persecution. But you did not call me, unfortunately, to talk to you about Josef Virgina. You invited me to speak about the philosophy of John Paul II. The hermeneutical criteria for the interpretation of the teaching of a pope are given not by his personal thought as a philosopher, but by the antecedents of the teaching of the church. So the immediate antecedents in which you must understand, on the background of which you must understand Redemptor Hominis, the first encyclical of John Paul II, is not the philosophical thought of the Pope, his personal thought, his thought as a doctor privatus, the theologians used to say, but the encyclicals of Paul VI. But now we will talk about the philosophy of Karol Wojtyła, because even this is a subsidiary source that helps us to understand, gives us some hints, because if the Spirit of God has chosen this man with this background, coming from this civilization, coming from this nation, well, it has also some certain meaning. God enters into our life through the mediation of the flesh and blood of other human beings, and in this case, of the Holy Father, of the Pope. So we will focus our attention on the philosophy of Karol Wojtyła. And I would like to structure what I am about to say a little bit like a symphony in two parts and one conclusion. Two parts, and each part divided in different movements. What is the first movement? As exergo of the first movement, we take three quotations. One of them is of Juan Luis Borges. I don't know if Borges is well known here in the Czech Republic. He's a great Argentinian poet, and he has written a poem with the title El otro lo mismo, the other, the same. The second one is Terentius. I should rather say Menander, because I am quoting a sentence that was originally written in Greek by Menander and translated into Latin by Terentius, but we don't have it in Greek. It is from the Autontimorúmenos, and it says, Nihil humanum a me extraneum esse puto. I do not consider anything that is human as foreign to me. And the third one comes from an Italian author, Pirandello. Uno, nessuno, centomila. One, nobody, 100,000. I don't think that Wojtyła has ever read any of these three sentences. They help us, however, to enter into the first beginnings of the philosophical vocation of Karol Wojtyła. Why? Because before being a philosopher, he was an actor. He was a disciple of Kotlarczyk, when Kotlarczyk was a great art director and the founder of the Theater of the World, Teatr Słowo, in Poland. And he was his right hand. And as right hand, he helped in the direction of several dramas, and also was the first actor in many of them. Now, what is an actor? He has written a few articles commenting on the experience of the theater of the world, and we draw on these articles. Who is an actor? An actor is a man who enters into the life of other men. I am Rocco, but I can play the part of Othello, or of Hamlet, or of whatever other character in a play. How can I do that? How can I be myself and at the same time another man? Remember Borges, el otro lo mismo. I am myself, but at the same time I am another man. A man who may seem to be extremely different from me. I can play the role of a serial killer, of Othello, a man who murdered his wife. How is it possible for me to play this role? What does it mean to play a role? It means that I have to rediscover in myself that man. I am not him, but I could have been him. Given different situations, given a different social context, given a different family, given so many different circumstances, I could have been him. So I can rediscover within myself the human experience that is constitutive of his human experience. There is a connection between us, among all men. And here you encounter Terentius. All that is human is in me. I participate of all that is human. Otherwise, I could not play the role of another human being. And this is the reason why Pirandello says that the actor is one, is nobody, and is 100,000. Meaning with 100,000, whoever. I can take the face and I can enter into the body and into the life of any other human being. There is something paradoxical in this, and in the philosophy of theater. By the way, there is an old disciple of me and a colleague of Professor Martin Zeitaml. Do you remember Jan Jacko? Jan now is professor of theater in Krakow, and he has written very good pieces exactly on this point. How can we think the paradox of the actor? We have to imagine that all men are one. As I am all men, then all men are me, on the one hand. And on the other hand, no, they are infinitely different from one another. There is one human nature, but let us say, using a philosophical language that Wojtyła, the young Wojtyła, would not have used. The mature man, yes, but the young Wojtyła would not have used this language. There are many different modalities of being the same man. One humanity and an infinite number of modalities. This implies that I can understand other human beings. I could not understand them if I were not them at a certain level. The experience of the actor is an experience that easily leads you into an important philosophical error. Relativism. There is a sentence that is attributed to Madame de Staël. She did not really wrote that. She wrote something similar, but not exactly this. Tout comprendre, c'est tout pardonner. To understand everything means to forgive everything. Even the worst human being who is wrong, nevertheless, has good reasons to be what he is. When I was a young man as old as some of you now. I was a student in the University of Torino, and I was a student of Professor Norberto Bobbio, a great philosopher of law. I don't know whether he's known here in the Czech Republic. Very anti-Catholic, by the way. And he used it to teach us with the method of case studies. Case studies means we rehearsal and a real process to learn how it works. And we have rehearsed the process of Nuremberg. You know the process of Nuremberg against the leaders of the National Socialist Party in Germany. And I had the task of being the lawyer defending Hermann Göring. And I went to him and I said, Professor, I cannot. He's guilty. What can I do? And on the other hand, I cannot defend a man I profoundly despise from the depths of my heart. And he gave me a great lesson. Every man has the right to a good defense. You cannot deny that he is guilty. Look for attenuating circumstances. And I studied the life of Hermann Göring, and I discovered a lot of attenuating circumstances. He was a monster, but he had good reasons to become a monster, beginning with the history of his very unhappy childhood and the way in which he was humiliated, his father was humiliated. I shall not tell you the history of Göring because it would lead us astray, but I could be Göring, and Göring could be me. And this implies the danger of relativism. So, every man has his own truth. Is this the essence of the experience of the actor? Well, in the case of many actors, you could draw this conclusion. Not in the case of the theater of the word. The theater of the word wanted to represent all human experiences, I can be anybody, as a kind of a second occasion given to everybody. I, reliving his human experience, give him a second occasion to live that in truth. What does it mean? There is they use it in this theater of the word to make representations of the great classics of Polish literature. One of them is Król Duch of Słowacki, of Juliusz Słowacki. Król Duch, the King's Spirit. It is a very complicated drama. I shall not try to explain it. But in this drama, there is one character that is the character of Bolesław Chrobry. Bolesław Chrobry, Bolesław the Bold, we could translate. He was a king, and he murdered the holy bishop Stanisław. He was a cruel monarch. He had been a friend of Stanisław Szczepanów, but Stanisław condemned his acts of cruelty, and he cut him to pieces. He cut his head. He killed him. And Wojtyła had the role of Bolesław Chrobry, and he gave a wonderful piece of interpretation. He was full of strength, of conviction of his own right. I am working to make Poland great, and this priest opposes me, and well, it is good what I did. I am happy of having done that. And everybody was happy with his interpretation. It was a great success. And then, after a while, the second time, he was hesitant, and he spoke in the name of the king as if he were confessing his sins. And it was not a great success. And all his colleagues went to him and asked him, why did you change your style of acting? First time you had been so successful. Why did you do that? And he said, but don't you understand? This man is confessing his sins because he sees what he has done in the light of truth. 2 weeks after this performance, he entered into the seminar. And here we pass to the second movement of our ideal symphony. He enters into the seminary of Krakow, and he comes from an experience impregnated with Carmelite spirituality. He participated in a kind of youth movement led by a tailor of the borough of Dębinski in Krakow, Jan Tyranowski. Now there is a course of beatification of Jan Tyranowski going on, by the way. And they had a very strong Carmelite spirituality. We could use here another author, St. John of the Cross. Nobody can be possessed by the true love of God until he has divested himself of the love of all created beings. So, it is Carmelite spirituality. You must strip naked your soul in front of God. And you must learn not to see anything, if not with the eyes of God. You must take the standpoint of God in looking to reality. And in order to do this, you must annihilate all your human passions. This spirituality of Tyranowski and, of course, of St. John of the Cross corresponded strictly also to a particular kind of philosophy that was done then in Poland. And it was done in Krakow, but mainly it was done in the University of Lublin. That was the main philosophical center of Catholic Poland in those years. I quote another name, less known than St. John of the Cross, Jerzy Kalinowski. Professor Kalinowski was a great representative of the deontical philosophy. Thomism, but a particular brand of Polish Thomism that is very similar to the Carmelite spirituality. You read the Summa, and especially the moral doctrine of St. Thomas, from the point of view of this unification with God, of taking the standpoint of God. And this means that you forget, put within parentheses, all your human preferences, all what is particular. You take, Hegel would say, you take the standpoint of the universal. You put yourself from the standpoint of the universal. The only reality is God. God is all, and man is nothing. And man has no rights in front of God. And you must learn to see the world from the point of view of God. Wojtyła loved. In the beginning, he had some difficulties with metaphysics, but later he accepted this standpoint, and it became an integral part of his personality. And you can find it expressed also in his motto, totus tuus. Can you really? Now that I have said this, I have some doubts. I shall explain you later why I have these doubts. Now I tell you only one point. Totus tuus does not mean really I belong totally to God. It is taken from Grignon de Montfort, a great expression of French spirituality, and it means I belong totally, yes, I belong totally to God, but through Mary. Why is this so important? Let's stop it for a while. We will see this later. The second stage is the stage in which we have this complete dispossessment of oneself to enter into the perspective of God. And then you have a third movement in this first part of our symphony. You find this third movement in a poem of Wojtyła. This poem has the title Kościół, that means the church. And we are following the maturation of the priestly vocation of Wojtyła. What does it mean to be a priest? And a priest is we have found this in Kościół and also in another poetical work of Wojtyła, The Jeweler's Shop. Did anybody of you read The Jeweler's Shop? You did. You remember Adam. Who is Adam?
Man. Any man or humanity?
Any man is one, nobody, 100,000. But he's not an actor. He's a priest. A priest who enters into the life of others in order to allow them to see their life in the light of truth. At a certain moment, one of the protagonists, Anna, is tempted to adultery. And she's just on the verge of taking the path. And Adam stops her. And he sees the tempest taking place in her heart. And she asks, where should my heart stay? And he answers, with truth. He lets truth enter into her experience and helps her to see her experience in the light of truth. That is the vocation of the priest. He belongs totally to God in order to allow, and he has no sentiments of his own, in order to allow others to live the experience of making the encounter with truth in their own lives and through their own sentiments, explaining, putting order within their own sentiments. That is the vocation of Wojtyła. And then this priest, yes, we have followed him since the beginning as a boy, practically. He begins with being an actor with, I don't know exactly, 15, 16. And then he continues. And we have followed him until he ends his studies in the seminary, and also in Rome. And he becomes a priest. He goes back to his bishop, and his bishop sends him into a parish church, and after a while, he takes care of the young universitarians, the students. There is one book in which you have a very clear reflection of the experience of being the pastor of a community of young people. And this book is Love and Responsibility. And he explains us, I tried to enter into the life of these young people. And I realized that the traditional moral theology, in particular, the moral theology of sex and marriage, did not work very well. Why? Because it wanted to see things from the point of view of God. But the young people, they do not are God. They do not take the point of view of God. And they are not even all called to a Carmelite vocation, because not even all priests should be according to the idea that Wojtyła had of being a priest. There is a great theologian, Hans Urs von Balthasar. I had the honor of being not his friend, because he was a great man, I was a small man. He was an old man, and I was a young man. But we were friends in the way in which very young people can be sometimes friends with old people. And he has written a wonderful book with the title ecclesiastical styles and laical styles. What von Balthasar has discovered is the same that we have tried to explain in the first movement of our Ideal Symphony. There are many ways, many modalities of living human truth. There are different styles of sanctity, and laical styles are different from ecclesiastical styles. And the students have not only had great difficulties in taking the point of view of the absolute, but they had no real reasons to do that because they had a different style of sanctity, a different path within the people of God. And Wojtyła then thought, I have to help them entering into their life and assuming their point of view and helping them to move towards truth, starting with the place where they are. You cannot lecture somebody who is not willing to hear or to listen. Your word has the capacity of entering into the heart of the other if you answer to questions that are the questions that he has in his heart. Otherwise, he will not listen. Love and responsibility gives us a new beginning. I want to begin with the real existing man. In the first pages of Law and Responsibility, in the introduction he explains the pastoral reasons why he entered into this frame of mind. In the first pages he explains his method. It is a method that is made of phenomenology and metaphysics. Metaphysics, it gives you the reason why we are all one. And from the moral point of view, metaphysics leads you to practical reason. Practical reason is the same in all human beings. Phenomenology allows you to enter into the world of each individual human being. Each individual human being is a world of his own. Well, these words are aggregated in the sense that the word of two young students who are both Czech and live both in Olomouc are very likely to have many traits in common. And so you can speak of a common word of experience, a common Lebenswelt, a common life world of the Czech people in a certain age of their history, or of the Italians, or even of the Europeans in a certain stage of their development, and so forth. But this common world has specific characteristics. You must enter into this world in order to be able to help people to see it from the point of view of truth. Metaphysics helps you to see the one. Do you remember Pirandello? One, nobody, 100,000. Metaphysics helps you to see the one. Phenomenology helps you to see the 100,000, to enter into each one of the 100,000 different configurations in which man lives his path towards truth. There is one truth and many paths leading to truth. And you must take the people where they are in order to help them in their path towards truth. And then the starting point of philosophy is the concretely existing man. In the first pages of Love and Responsibility, Wojtyła gives us this methodological introduction. And now we enter into the second part. By the way, in the beginning I forgot to give an important forewarning. There was a little bit of confusion because of the microphone, and I forgot to say something very important. I am an Italian, and you know, Italians are too talkative. I have been a politician, and politicians always speak too long. And worst of all, I am a professor, and the professors are the worst of all. So please, Martin, when I am going too far with time, let me know. Give me 5 minutes to make a kind of conclusion.
Like that, in 5 minutes we should finish.
We should finish already?
No. If I do like that.
Oh, well, when you do that. Well, now, in the second movement of our ideal symphony, we make a comparison. We start with the starting point, the methodological starting point of Wojtyła, and then we make a comparison with 3 other starting points that are important in philosophy. Love and responsibility. The world is made up of a large number of objects. This is the first sentence of Love and Responsibility. Wojtyła says this, immediately he has second thoughts. A large number of objects? Yes. But I could begin saying the world is made up of a large number of subjects. And it would be even better to say it is made up of a large number of subjects. Why? Because subjects are more interesting than objects. Any human person is more interested than a chair or a table or even a beautiful mountain. But the person is even more fascinating than a wonderful landscape. If this person is a girl, even more. Now, why did I say the world is made up of a large number of objects? Well, because if I had started saying the world is made up of a large number of subjects, I would have run the risk of forgetting that subjects are also objects. In all of modern philosophy, in a large part of modern philosophy, it is more precise, we have the idea that we begin with the subject, and the subject constitutes his word or her word through his or her consciousness. The word is constituted in consciousness. Yes, every man constitutes in consciousness his or her word, but nevertheless, it does not create his or her word. To constitute does not mean, it has not the same meaning as to create. What is the difference? The difference is that I constitute my word on the basis of an original being that I have in common with all other human beings. There is an original gift of being that is the basis for my constitution. I attribute values to the things, but I attribute values to the things on the basis, first of all, of the fact that they are there. They are objects. Objectum is there, something that stands in front of a subject. It is there. I do not constitute it as in itself. I constitute it as an object for myself. So I constitute my word on the basis of an objective word that comes before me, and that is created by God and not created by the consciousness. Second, we have only one word, and we constitute different cultural, subjective words, but nevertheless, since there is only one word, I must come to terms with the words of others. I must be able to talk to them and to constitute my subjective word together with them. So you have 3 elements or 3 words that are necessarily, intrinsically linked to one another. One is the word that is created by God. One is the word constituted in my consciousness. The third one is the word constituted in the relation of my consciousness to the consciousness of others. And if I start with saying the word is constituted by a large number of subjects, I run the risk of not seeing this complexity. And I run the risk of not seeing that I, myself, am a subject, However, I am also an object. My structure has an objective, my subjectivity has an objective structure. As an objective structure because my subjectivity is linked to a really existing body. And as an objective structure because also the human spirit has an objective structure. I can understand the other on the basis of this objective structure that we have in common with any other man. So you see how the experience of the ontological ethics, the experience of the Carmelite spirituality, and the experience of being an actor now come and converge with one another. We can better understand this if we make a comparison. How much time do I have?
Well, it's 15 minutes.
15? Well, in principle, the idea was of making 3 great comparisons, or even 4, with 4 different beginnings of philosophy, 4 different starting points of philosophy. One that of St. Thomas Aquinas, primo quod cadit in intentione est ens. What enters into my field of attention, first of all, is being. The second is that of Descartes, cogito ergo sum. Whatever it means, we will see. The third one was Wittgenstein. The last words of the treatise, of the Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, of the things on which you cannot talk, you must remain silent. And the fourth was Karl Marx, the beginning of the Capital. The world has a great amount of wares, merchandises. Perhaps we can limit ourselves to 2 today, that is St. Thomas and Descartes. What is the meaning of primo quod cadit in intentione est ens? The starting point of philosophy is being. Wojtyła accepts the starting point. The reason why he does not begin with the world is made up of a great quantity of subjects is that he wants to be a Thomist and wants fundamentally to accept the starting point of St. Thomas. Nevertheless, since the beginning, he wants to say, well, the object is not something that is indifferent in itself, stands in relation with the subject, stands in front of a subject. Wojtyła that this position of St. Thomas Aquinas needs to be understood, to be interpreted. And in his time, there were 2 important interpretations of this. There is the danger of a certain unilaterality. In the Thomistic philosophy, as it was taught in those years, there was the danger of coming near to a kind of positivism. We start with objects and we try to create a philosophy and a theology that is the philosophy and theology of a world of pure objects. But the object of St. Thomas is not the object. The ens is not the object of modern science. There were some Thomist philosophers, I mention here mainly 2. One is Etienne Gilson, and the other one is Cornelio Fabro, who more or less in those years, there were also others. I should mention also, of course, a Jesuit father, De Finance, more than the other 2, because the philosopher was a professor of Wojtyła in the Angelicum of Rome. But they all, one way or another, tried to see the difference between the ends of St. Thomas and the object of positivism. And they do it mainly through the notion of actus essendi. The object is not just an object. The object is a concretization, the ens is a concretization of the action of God who puts it into being and maintains it in being. So the object stands necessarily in relation with the subject. First of all, with God as a subject. Through this, you can see an opening in the Thomistic philosophy that allows us to put in relation the philosophy of being with the human subjectivity. Because the human subjectivity stands in front of an object that is not just an object. It's an object that is an expression of the creating power of God, and in this way, this object is at the same time a symbol. It has a meaning. It contains in itself a specific meaning. And I have the task. And this meaning is given for me as the human subject who has to interpret this meaning. And then you have a Thomism that is open to the reality of existence, not by chance. The Thomism of Gilson was called an existential Thomism. And by the way, in the University of Lublin, there was a great philosopher, Professor Zwierzawski, who was also a friend of Wojtyła, who was introducing this kind of Thomism within the Polish world. And this allows Wojtyła to think of a Thomism that is open to the dimension of the existential experience of the individual. That is, a Thomism that can think the subject. And then let us come to the second possible beginning of philosophy. That is, cogito ergo sum. I think. How shall we translate it? One could translate, I think, then I am. Therefore I am. I am not fully satisfied with this translation. Because this translation, well, I begin putting within brackets all existing reality with the systematic doubt. And if I put within brackets all existing objects, I put within brackets also, together with the objects, all logical laws. I've put within brackets all mathematical laws, and I've put within brackets also all logical laws. How can I make a deduction from being, from thinking to being? Cogito ergo sum. It is illogical. The only way in which we can consistently translate cogito ergo sum is I think, I am. We have not a deduction. We have one act of thought in which at the same time and in a correlation to one another, I perceive that I think and I perceive that I am. So I have three given in this unique act of thought. The ego, I, thought, and being. Cogito, ergo sum. Modern philosophy begins with the subject. But does it really begin with the subject? And here, again, I have doubts. Or rather, who is this subject with whom modern philosophy begins? Is it you? Is it me? Is it Descartes? One element that always surprises me when I read the Discours sur la méthode, the discourse on method of Descartes, is that he gives us a short biography of himself. In this biography, one point is missing. It is an important point. The fact that he was born. He does not seem to have been born. He does not seem to have had a father. He does not seem to have had a mother. All of a sudden, he's there, coming out of nothing. A kind of creatio ex nihilo, creation from nothing. The subject, one possible reading of Descartes is that the subject that is given there is a pure transcendental subject. That is, it is the condition for thinking. What is really given is thought, and the subject is just the condition for thinking. It's not an empirical subject. It is only a transcendental subject. And then this transcendental subject has a criterion of truth, and this criterion of truth is the apodicticity. It is given in a way that is indubitable. So I shall accept now as true only propositions that are equally undubitable. Descartes was, together with Fermat, the inventor of analytical geometry, and together with Galileo, the inventor of modern natural science. I constitute modern natural science on this basis, on a science that is undubitable. And this science is the science of pure objects moving in time and space. A pure object is an object that is constituted according to the criterion of truth of the cogito. If you read Descartes in this way, you enter into a path that can lead you to positivism or to idealism. After a while, the path is divided in two. But that's the way in which you go. Is this the only possible interpretation of Descartes? No. You can read it in a different way, that is a modern way, but also an ancient way. If we want to call it a modern way, we could say it is the way of Karl Popper. Karl Popper tells us, when you have a theory, you can never test a theory as such. You can only test a consequence derived from the theory. If that consequence is falsified, then the whole theory is falsified. Then you can say, I doubt everything. But I discover that this doubt is unjustified, then the doubt is falsified, and I have the right to reacquire the usual confidence in being. Does this destroy the modern science? Not at all. The modern science is one modality of exercise of human reason, but there are other modalities. I have quoted Popper, but I think that many of you have already in their head the name of another philosopher who, before Popper, did give this fundamental theoretical elucidation. And this man was Pascal. Pascal is the great continuator of Descartes and the great critic of Descartes at the same time. And he begins a different way of interpretation of Descartes. There is the word of modern science. It is a word of pure objects moving in time and space. But there is also another dimension of reason, and this dimension of reason is a prudential dimension, and this is the dimension of what we can call wisdom. St. Augustine an author who is extremely important to Wojtyła. If you look to Love and Responsibility, you see how Love and Responsibility has a Thomist structure, but an Augustinian spirit. No? And you see that the world is made of objects. Some of them are pure objects. Some are impure objects. Human beings are not pure objects. They are pure objects in one sense, but not just pure objects. And what you need to understand human beings is something different from what you need to understand pure objects. What you need to understand human beings is a different kind of wisdom and a different kind of philosophy. And this philosophy is a philosophy that is based on the phenomenological method. Put within brackets all what you think that you know, and go back to what you have really experienced in your own life. Put within brackets all what you think you know about sex, family, and so forth. Start with the experience that you have had, really, of family and sex, the relation to your parents, the first falling in love that you are experiencing when you are a university student, and let us work on this basis. And and then there is these two elements, the world of pure objects, the world of subjects, and there is metaphysics. Metaphysics does not coincide with the methodology for the knowledge of the world of pure objects. Metaphysics is not science. Because the object of metaphysics is not the object of science. The object of science is a pure object, and human beings are not pure objects. And whenever you introduce into the world of science elements that pertain to the human world, then you make an error. This is the cause of all possible errors. It is a great French epistemologist, Gaston Bachelard, has said it is the epistemological obstacle. No? You must take finality out of the world of science. But do you have the right of having finality in the world of metaphysics? Of course you have. Why? Because in the world of man, you find finality. You cannot understand the world of man without teleology. And since the object of metaphysics is not the pure object, but the reality, or what we might call the real object, in which subjects are included, then you have an access to metaphysics. Wojtyła gives us this methodological approach, and the center of this is a kind, and you cannot understand the first part of also Butiglionne, the acting person of Wojtyła, as a kind of reformulation of the cogito that gives you not the abstract ego, not the transcendental, but the really existing ego, and gives you a methodology to enter into the life of the really existing persons. Wojtyła stands between St. Thomas, primo quod cadit in intentione stans, and Descartes. We start from man. In this sense, he is absolutely modern. If modernity means that you begin with man, Wojtyła is absolutely modern. Is even more modern than Descartes, because in modernity you start with man, but then immediately you lose the existential force of this beginning, because this man is man written large, the humanity. In the case, but we have not spoken about Marx. In the case of Marx, it becomes humanity as such, or it becomes the transcendental ego. Now, it is the empirical ego, but an empirical ego who is connected with others, because you discover that this empirical ego is an individual, but also a member of a community. He has a heart. There are evidences and exigencies that are structural for the human heart. And in these evidences you find the presence of God. I am, but I am not the absolute being. I am a contingent relative being. I cannot think of myself if I do not think more or less unconsciously on the background. to the presence of God, and also exigencies, demands of the heart, the demand of encountering a love that is adequate to my demands. And this, last word, is the reason why I say the philosophy of Wojtyła is a philosophy of the Council, of the Ecumenical Council Vatican II. Why? The Ecumenical Council wants to think the word of man, modernity, but on the basis of truth. I stop here, and I thank you very much for your attention. Very happy to see that nobody has fallen asleep.